Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
We sit with 7 rounds remaining in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, and under the shadow of the legendary Soul Mountain of Mount Fuji, this Fuji Speedway now sets itself up to be one of the most important races. It's the difference today between saying championship alive and championship wrapped up with a nice, neat bow. Welcome to SimSpeed TV's coverage of this brilliant 2025 season. My name's Jake Sperry, Taylor Mills, along with me for today's action at the circuit, which hosted the Olympic Games Cycling Road Championship time trials, and of course also held both men and women's road races in its entirety as a finishing point. Taylor, I am so hyped for this circuit. It's one of the great circuits to battle on. It's one of these circuits that has 2 different personalities between first and second sectors.
It certainly is, Sperry, and how wonderful it is to be back at Fuji Speedway, a strip of tarmac that is just 4.5 kilometers long and sits as one of the shortest tracks on our entire iRacing Grand Prix Tour calendar. As Sperry said, it is nestled in the foothills of Mount Fuji, and one of the more interesting things about this circuit is the fact it has been here for so long, we've gone through so many redesigns, that Herman Tilke himself has had a hand in redesigning that third sector. So as we zoom in on the circuit itself, we'll have a quick look around this legendary facility. That start-finish straight is was one of the longest on our calendar and is host to the second of our 2 DRS zones. Of course, we have that very tricky turn 1 that can be the cause of so many incidents as cars funnel their way through that very tight apex. Quick flick through 3 and a never-ending turn 4 and 5 through the famous 100R. And even though it is a bit tricky to drive, one of the best sectors for racing, probably in the world, is that third and final sector. The fastest line through there being to take it wide and cut in late. It opens up that inside line for someone to just stick a nose down there and see what happens. As we mentioned, 2 DRS zones on this circuit today. The first detection point down into turn 1, the second one just before the final corner. That first zone, very short, not much time to make things happen, but it's going to be that second DRS zone down the start-finish straight that is going to be the home to most of the action today.
Yeah, the opportunity to attack back at Coca-Cola corner, turn 3. Keep an eye on those runs to TGR corner, turn number 1. You can have attacks out of Advan corner, which is after 100 right, and then through Dunlop, you've got that final dueling section of lefts and rights up the hill, the GR Supra corner and the Panasonic corner that ends the lap outright. We weren't able to bring you coverage last time out at Aragon because Jay Kennedy is very good at having cars that blows up on himself. But as far as that goes, what a battle it would have been, because Eduardo Radice was able to pick up his 9th race win of the season, and he got the lock, Taylor, last time out. Pole position, fastest lap, race win.
Yeah, and what a result for Eduardo Radice, and what a reflection on how his season has been so far. Unfortunately, no Jacob Reed, as he was ill last time out, but that chance for Radice to just stretch that lead, well, in this case, a lot more and even open up the chance for others to make their way up the leaderboards. It'll be interesting to see if Reed can keep himself in it today. It's going to be one heck of a job if he wants to make that happen. But Radice very much sitting pretty at the top of the championship.
Yeah, doing so fantastically with retirees for Gerard Burrell, Jeffrey Lawler, Filippo Manoni, who made his first start since Suzuka 2022, believe it or not, last time out, and John Silver. It was a day of keep your eyes on who did find themselves there. Your iRacing Championship standings, Eduardo Radice 500 points clear, looking very much the likeliest candidate to pick that up. We know that Jacob Reed's got a drop round in the back pocket as well to go and work with, so Florian Kammerer isn't necessarily safe in that second position at the moment as it stands. That goes all the way down with Reynaldo Augusto doing great work in alternative softs to move himself into 8th position. Edward Apari-Ari, with his 4th place finish last time out, jumps into the top 10. And then, of course, you've got your likes of your SimSpeed Championship standings, which now sit very precariously up at the top as things go. About 98 championship points to the good now for Eduardo Radice over Jacob Reed. So really shows you how that all looks to go about, with Florian Kammerer 3rd and Volta Lux in 4th. You then got James Byrne, Emil Bernstorff, the likes of George Van Rensburg, Edward Apari-Ari, Alex Hagland and Paul O'Regan, all looking to put their points together on the board. Qualifying is currently underway. It's a 67-lap race, though, Taylor, that we've got coming along. And so we've got to keep an eye on who's won last here. Julien Magalon picking up his only win in the Grand Prix Tour in 2023, and Jacob Reed getting it done last year.
Yeah, Julien Magalon not here to defend that crown here tonight, but the strategy as it stands for this evening, a relatively simple one, as I'm sure you are about to see. Tyre life is long, as we expect, not quite having the compound that they would bring here in real life, which would be a step or two softer, but we do, as always, bring that C2, C3, and C4. And again, with the short length of the track, that tyre life staying particularly long. But as we say, in terms of strategy, it is a big pit lane time loss. So you are going to want that one-stop strategy today. And it will be between that soft and medium tire in whichever order you so choose. We've seen a lot of drivers stick to those harder compounds off the start to give themselves a stronger finish. But the softs, we know, give you a little bit extra off the start. And with how long they can go in this race, there might be a chance for someone to take that soft tire and try to run away in that first stint.
And we have definitely seen that various drivers have been able to put themselves with as much ability as possible. All drivers who can qualify have been able to qualify. So that means we're down with 3 splits today to just an 18-car field. And because of that nature of this splitting 3 times, Taylor, this is the strongest strength of field the iRacing Grand Prix Tour has ever had.
Yeah, it certainly is. 5.6k teetering on the edge of 5.7k, and that is going to go and show you the absolute talent that we have on show here today. But look at that already. We'll go through the grid shortly, but Jacob Reed opening that bank strong with that 14.9.
He needed it, and he needed it strong here at Fuji Speedway. He won here last year, of course, on that record-breaking run of victories, and he wants to stand up and say, this is what I'm capable of doing. He needs to start pulling in points hand over fist. When you're down 98 in the championship, there's a lot that you need to go your way in order to bring it back. Let's run ourselves through, then, the starting grid for today's action here from Fuji Speedway. You can see it there on the left-hand side. Jacob Reed with controller 114.952. Mario Bodlosh then will be alongside for company on the front row of the grid is the Austrian. Alex Hagland will start this one in 3rd, continuing his purple patch of form. And then, of course, you've got Eduardo Radice, who will be in 4th position overall, your championship leader. James Byrne just a 10th off of him in position number 5, as we're just about ready to switch on over into the race server, which will be 67 laps worth of racing. You've then got George van Rensburg in 6th place with likes of Florian Kammeyer and Volta Lux in 7th and 8th. Your top 10 will be rounded out by Gerard Borel and with Jason Green as Mark van Dalen and Dennis Branch are 11th and 12th. And we'll take a look. There's your top 6. Reed, Bodlosh, Hagland, Radice, Byrne and Van Rensburg. Over then to Florian Kammeyer in 7th, Volta Lux in 8th. Gerard Borel 9th. Jason Green hasn't yet scored a SimSpeed Championship point. He's got a great chance today starting from 10th with Mark van Dalen and Dennis Branch 11th and 12th. You then got Reynaldo Augusto in 13th, a little out of position with Sebastian Rekov in 14th. Paul O'Regan missed the top 10, will go from 15th with Lyle Pinar 16th. And your final 2, Emil Lundell not electing to qualify, and Jeffrey Lawler down there at the back as well in 18th position. So 2 minutes to get themselves gridded up and ready. And of course, that run to TGR corner, turn number 1, ever the more important as they get themselves ready. They know that this is going to be a fast, frantic start, knowing that they got to get up to high speed very, very quickly. And around a circuit like this, it is worth keeping in mind that it is blustery here today. It is going to be a crosswind when they go along the main straight, and they will be dealing with that as they battle for position. Very gusty today here in Japan, but today it's a case of who can manage what. Almost everybody starting on the medium compound tyres. We wait just for George van Rensburg, and there he is on the grid. So now for 67 laps, your lights will find themselves on. Let's get ourselves set and ready, because racing action starts now, and we're underway. It's a poor start from Bodlosh off the front. James Byrne gets an absolute stormer of a start and moves up to second, and will now challenge for the race lead around the outside into TGR corner. He's going to try and get the drive off the exit. There's a spin in the middle. Alex Hagland takes a tap. Jason Green into the grass, but as they go, Jacob Reed's got his lead, but James Byrne is up to second.
Just as we thought Alex Hagland was having a step forward in the middle of the season, it all falls apart yet again as he makes his way right down the order. Eduardo Radiso coming under plenty of pressure from Mario Bodlosh, who found himself all the way down in 4th place off the start. Just cuts the nose off your championship leader. There's contact. A little bit of contact between the two on the run down to the hairpin, and there is going to be damage on the front wing of Eduardo Radice. Can he hold on to it, or is he going to have to pit to get that repaired?
It's on the front left, and it is just the smallest indent that goes through. If it's going to upset him too much as he goes through the GR Supra corner, he is going to be really in a world of hurt here today, especially as it's the front left. You've got so many right-hand bends on a clockwise circuit like this. You will drop a lot of time. Mark van Dalen will have his eyes set on this then. 1 lap complete. Reynaldo Augusto out. Florian Kammeyer was missing his front wing, and there is, yes there is, pit stop for Eduardo Radice. He's going to get his front wing changed, and I would wonder whether he's going to a hard tyre now.
Well, we're certainly about to find out the hard way as Alex Hagland making his way down the inside of Dennis Branch down into turn 1. But certainly that throws a little bit of spice into that championship fight as Jacob Reed still leads the way, but Eduardo Radice finding himself way outside the points. This is that sort of race that Reed has needed all season long. Is this going to be a chance for him to claw back some of those points?
Well, if you can claw them back, this is the time to do it. When Eduardo Radice is in trouble, Kammeyer's in trouble, Reynaldo Augusto out, and so they are now onto soft tyres, switching to a 2-stop strategy. 10.8 second stop for Eduardo Radice and 9.6 for Florian Kammeyer. Alex Hagland finds himself in 8th place then at this stage, and he'll be looking around saying, right, good job me at this point, with Dennis Branch behind. Good start as well from Emil Lundell, who's made good progress. He's up to 12th, and there goes Hagland off the road then at the GR Supra corner. Easy to do. It's off camber through the final 2.
Yeah, such a tricky sector of corners as well. A lot of these drivers we've run in on a single monitor, which significantly restricts the amount of space you can actually see outside the car. So getting down to those apexes is quite a bit of guesswork, as Mario Bodlosh taking that fastest lap of the session so far and crawling his way up to the back of James Byrne, who is very dutifully just staying in place behind your race leaders. Jeffrey Lawler finds his way off the road down at turn 1 after just passing Alex Hagland.
Yep, so now behind Emma Lundell and Alex Hagland then, the two Swedes together. James Byrne in second position, giving chase then to Jacob Reed, and just for the briefest moment, dipping outside of a second. And that would have been a scary prospect if you lose the DRS, because it is so critical along this main straight. George Van Rensburg up to fourth, and Paulo Reagan now looking like he's dropped a little bit of time here as he goes side by side with Sebastian Rekov.
Yeah, Rekov, who just found himself in a bit of trouble with Jeffrey Lawler down into turn 6. I think Lawler just braking a little bit earlier than Rekov expected, and the American got himself ran over just before the apex of that turn and backwards off the road. Rekov might be carrying a little bit of damage, just trying to see if we can spot any. No, certainly doesn't look like it, so he got away with one there, but Jeffrey Lawler got some recovery work to do now.
Yeah, a lot of that time to gather back up again, and a change for the race lead, because there goes James Byrne straight back to the inside, and he will take that race lead away. Jacob Reed in second, Mario Bodlosh watches on then in P3, but here's where the DRS comes back for the Coca-Cola corner at turn number 3. Now through 100 right. Now looking to try and get those radians into play. And now Mario Bodlosh sneaks one up the inside now. So Jacob Reed from leading is now having to fend that second place off.
He certainly is, and with all this fight between him and Bodlosh, that could find him a touch off the back of James Byrne, who of course took his first race win at the Italian Grand Prix a couple of rounds ago. It's a chance for him to try and claw back a few more points. Florian Camera on the soft takes the fastest lap of the race, but we have got that second of 2 DRS zones coming up, and it is a long one. 1.2 seconds is the gap as it stands at the front of the field, but Mario Bodlosh in a great spot to try and take second place from Jacob Reed pretty much for free.
One lap and 1.4 seconds broken away. James Byrne has the phasers lit, and I wonder how much battery he dumped in order to build that margin. Here comes Mario Bodlosh now to make that charge down the inside. Different wing settings between the pair as they go through. It's a flat beveled wing for Jacob Reed. Mario Bodlosh has himself a little bit more downforce to use, and so even that still works itself out then with James Byrne as well. And I think that's the critical factor here, that downforce levels for the top 2 are the same, and then 3rd and 4th have the same levels as well, but they are different between your top 2 and second 2.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key points about this track, is you have to make a choice between going faster on the straights or faster in the corners. It's a trade-off between less tyre wear and more tyre wear, as the less downforce you have on the car, the more tyre scrub you get. And we've seen for Jacob Reed, he's not as good as keeping the tyres alive as other drivers in this field. So maybe the lower downforce levels could be a factor in that, and we'll see how that affects his strategy. But as it stands, that higher downforce trim looks like the way to go, as James Byrne and Mario Bodlosh are opening up that gap at the front.
They certainly are, and it's going to take the whole straight here for Jacob Reed to claw himself back in. That is if he has himself the DRS flat open, which he does not along this straight. So no DRS through the front 3. Now it's George Van Rensburg's turn to take the podium. What a horrible sight this is going to be for Jacob Reed. 1, 2, and 3 in the space of 2 laps, then going away from him, and GVR looking once again to prove his mettle right now, and could move up to the top 10 in championship points all time with a 3rd place finish today.
Jacob Reed looking a lot stronger on the brakes than his competitors today, but it's on corner exits that he seems to really be struggling, because for all intents and purposes, he should have been on the advantageous line down the inside of turn 3 with George Van Rensburg, but as he has a wiggle down into turn 10, the South African was just able to get away on corner exit and be clear way before they got to the next overtaking spot, and DRS wasn't even good enough to get him back into play.
No, it wasn't, and that tells you how tough this season has been. Jacob Reed, at the turn of the halfway point in the season, has really found himself with a lot of trouble. I want to give some major credit out there as well to Gerard Burrell, who is up in 5th position at the moment. Just has a couple of massive blinks, though, and he's got to be careful about those. Gerard Burrell, for comparison, in terms of his season, he's only ever scored in the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour 5 championship points. His best finish is 2 9th place finishes overall. So this would be huge for him, a first top 5.
It certainly would be, and he's hanging on to it for now, but he does have the likes of Volterworks, Mark Van Dalen and Emil Lundell just behind him. Is it a case of the Spaniard going a little bit too early, burning up those tyres, and will we see a drop off of pace in the next 15 laps or so? It's only really going to be time that's going to tell, but you've still got to give credit to Burrell. He's doing a great job as it stands.
I'm just taking a look at the times as well. Eduardo Rodis doing 18.1s, 18.3s by comparison for James Byrne. Kamaya, the quickest driver on track at the moment on an 18 flat, is at current about 3 seconds off the back of Eduardo Rodis. So Florian Kamaya definitely not out of this race compared to that, and you can see there the difference in lap times as they go about 41 seconds the margin. But critically, Jeffrey Lawler is 15th place, and he's doing 19.1s at the moment, so a second a lap, I would say at this stage. Remember that at the pit stop, Jeffrey Lawler will need to switch from mediums onto softs. I think it's going to take this entire stint for Eduardo Rodis to find another car.
Yeah, it certainly is. That pace advantage on the softs just isn't as strong, I think, as Rodis was expecting, but he is just kind of chipping away at this one. And we might see him go onto the mediums at the end of the race and stretch those out a little bit longer. But again, it's only Rodis that knows what he's going to do to try and see this race out. But right now, it just doesn't look like he's pushing those softs as hard as he could be.
Dennis Branch on the inside gets the move done on Sebastian Rekov, who will find himself now having to play the game from 12th place and work out what he needs. They've got Paul O'Regan behind as well in 13th, and Jeffrey Lawler 14th, and the pass he's made now on Jason Green, who's back in 15th position. So they are starting to think about where they want to place themselves down the hill to the lowest section of the circuit, the Dunlop hairpin.
Yeah, they certainly are, but Dennis Branch just trying to eke that gap close to Lau Pino in front as he sits about 1.4 seconds off the back of the SimSpeed Championship point. Fortunately for him, Pino is all on his own. So the second he gets DRS, which is maybe just about now, it might have been close enough as they came through turn 16. We'll have to wait and see. That could be what brings him into championship points paying positions.
9 starts for Sebastian Rekov, no SimSpeed Championship points in his history, and there are your live points on the right-hand side, and you can see Eduardo Rodis currently with a goose egg. Jacob Reed would eat into that gap by 12, but it still wouldn't be nearly enough to get to where Jacob Reed would want at this stage. Volta looks through on Gerard Burrell. That puts him up now into the top 5, and critically, 1 championship point behind Florian Kamaya and 2 behind James Byrne.
Yes, it does, and it is a change of position. Volta making his way up into the top 5. We probably would have expected it to be only a matter of time, considering how consistent and how fast and how tough a battler Volta is. That Burrell looking like he didn't fight that one too hard and lets the Austrian go. And already, Volta pulling at 0.8 of a second in front of P6. I don't think he's going to be able to break DRS as they come through the final corner, but we are about to find out.
Well, if he can break away, this would be critical for his race. He can focus then on trying to attack forward and execute his strategy. Burrell, full bore with 321 kilometers an hour of straight line, 323, 310 only for Volta in a straight line, so able to take 13 clicks on a straight. It's a long straight, so it certainly helps, but it certainly didn't get it all done. Jeffrey Lawler getting a very nice switch on at the moment. He now finds himself by Paul O'Regan. That gets him up to 13th. He'll lie at Rekov for 12th, with Branch and Pinar fighting for a championship point.
Yeah, solid move from Lawler to get himself past Paul O'Regan down into turn 1. But just to turn eyes to the front of the field for a second, James Byrne has been managing this race absolutely beautifully.
What a change.
As Jacob Reed finally makes his way back past George van Rensburg and puts himself on that third podium spot. He's only a second and a half behind Mario Bodlosh. But what Byrne is doing is just keeping Bodlosh outside that DRS window and keeping himself protected on that very long start-finish straight, as I think he escapes the DRS threat. Yet again, we'll keep an eye on that steering wheel. DRS not available, and Byrne maintaining that race lead.
Mario Bodlosh has been a threat in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour before. His best result is a third place finish at Fuji last year. He's so good around this place. GVR does not get close enough to make the move on the start of lap 11, but Mario Bodlosh, if there was any place to break your sim racing duck, as there goes Mark van Dalen now for position, along with Alex Hagland. Hagland finds his way through. Emil Lundell has broken through the pair of them as well, and now Van Dalen finds himself back in ninth place. Hagland to 8th, Lundell now 7th.
Yeah, great job from Hagland to get himself clear on that run through turn 3. It can be a really tricky spot to hold on to a position if your opponent has that inside line, but his exit from turn 1, the shorter run through turn 2, and just opening up that corner and getting as quick a run through there as he could, made him hold on to that spot. So a great bit of driving from the Swede.
There's your race leader, James Byrne, who leads outright now by 1.1 seconds. The big wide arc you take at Panasonic corner to try and cut the exit off and straight line as quickly as you can for this long main straight at the top end of the circuit. You can even see as you go along this section the light that comes off of the catch fences and the like as you see the grandstands on the left hand side. You've got to be very careful, spot your braking zone, hope your brakes don't go cold, and then hit turn number 1 with all the venom and fury that you can. TGR corner heading back to Coca-Cola corner once again. Once more Paul O'Regan in a scrap. Sebastian Rekov now looking like he's going to be going the wrong way. Both of them at the limit of what their battery can deploy for them, and the inside line is still there for Paul O'Regan. He'll get the drive off the exit down the hill, and that second lot of DRS helps him out. Paul O'Regan back to 13th.
Yeah, Sebastian Rekov just leaving way too much space to O'Regan on the inside of turn 1. I don't think that was intentional. That looks more like Rekov out-braking himself a little bit, but it's what sacrificed the position back to Paul O'Regan, as it is him that now starts that hunt down on Jeffrey Lawler. Gap under a second, another DRS zone to come in a sector or so's time. It might be the chance for Mr. Top 10 to get back inside the top 10.
It certainly would do. Gerard Burrell, though, is going to have to play defensive here because Emil Lundell is trying to work his way up the order here with Alex Hagland in tow. Couple of Swedes working together, and there was a time where Emil Lundell, if he decided he wanted to put a season together, he could fight for a championship. He does like turning up in these later rounds of the season, and now Gerard Burrell, can he fend off the charge? And the answer is yes for the moment, because Emil, not using all his battery, gets very close up behind and can't quite get the move. Remember as well, Emil Lundell was involved in lap 1. He's the reason why Renato Augusto is out of the race in through turn 3 at Coca-Cola. Not quite there, but maybe line it up for the Advan corner coming up next.
Yeah, let's see if he can get it done. He does have a downforce advantage, as Emil Lundell running a much higher level of that rear wing, which is probably why he was able to get so close with that aggressive concertina effect down into turn 1. With more downforce, you can brake a lot more aggressively, as there is so much more force pushing all 4 of those Pirelli tyres down into the ground. There's no tyre disparity between these two drivers. It is all on that downforce level, as through that twisty final section they come. It's wide for Gerard Burrell. He's going to leave him vulnerable to Emil Lundell up the hill. Will he be able to find a way through in the final couple of corners? It might come down to the DRS zone yet again, but Burrell has done really well to hold on through that DRS zone in the last lap. Can he make it happen again?
Well, if you're going to get this launch out the Panasonic corner, this is the perfect place to try that move. Battery being dumped to try and defend. Here comes Emil to the outside, and this one could be as plain as sailing gets to make this pass. He commands the apex on the inside at TGR corner. He gets the pass done, and now can Alex Hagland make it 2 for 2, fighting off the exit. DRS will help stave the defence, and Gerard is able to keep himself in 7th place for now, but Hagland is searching about, hoping there is any way to go through, and a mistake for Mario Bodlosh by the looks of it. He's now dropping down the order here. He's gone miles down the order. There he is. He's gone off.
Yeah, he was off in the gravel at one point as well. Hopefully we get a replay to show you guys exactly what happened there. His way to the outside he went and flick spun it round to the right. So just a mistake for Mario Bodlosh is what found him off the road. But he's lost so many positions in all of that. He was up there in 2nd place and is now all the way down in 8th. Here he comes through turn 5, braking for 6, all over that curb on the outside, clipping a bit of grass, loses grip on the right-hand side of the car and into a half spin. He was lucky to not hit any barriers there with the way his car pitched, but keeps himself in the race. No damage, but maybe lost a little bit of pride.
That one will hurt, and he knows that he's taken away that chance of victory. Jacob Reed is 2nd, and he's going to have to work to get this back on the group of Hagland, Burrell, and Emil Lundell has cleared. No chance of a move into TGR corner. Lap 14, proving tricky and troublesome for Mario Bodlosh here on lap 15 of 67. We're about halfway through the first stints for everyone to try and work their way through, to try and gain these places and get anything that they possibly can. Alex Hagland really hunting for that place here with Gerard Burrell, and Gerard is giving himself a really good showing of himself at this stage. Down the hill they go, looking towards the Dunlop hairpin. What a tricky hairpin this is as well, Taylor, because you hit the brakes and you're immediately dealt with a slow speed chicane.
Yeah, it's one of the trickiest braking zones on the circuit easily, because it's such a challenge to get that braking right, because if you brake 5 meters too late, you are way past that apex. As Burrell finds himself off the road up at turn 15, just getting the braking a little bit wrong. It's another one of the challenges of this circuit, as you find yourself going through 1, 2, 3, 4 corners in a row where you are braking whilst turning, and that is one thing these cars really don't like. And Gerard Burrell finding that out the hard way as Mario Bodlosh gets back past Alex Hagland.
And Taylor, how critical is it that we got this blustery wind here today? I think it's causing havoc with the aerodynamics.
I'm trying to remember exactly which direction the wind is blowing in, but if it's a tailwind up the hill, these cars are super aerosensitive, and if you get any sort of wind catching the underside of that car, it doesn't matter if you're going 100 odd kilometers an hour, a 15, 20 kilometer an hour tailwind is essentially going to lift that back end of the car up off the ground and reduce that rear downforce by a lot more than you might be expecting. And I think that is what Gerard Burrell found out the hard way.
Yeah, and how difficult this has been as Bodlosh now deals with Alex Hagland and moves back into P6 with that trade-off that we've got. The wind's blustering in from the west at this point in time, so for measure of metric from the west, it is creating a crosswind on the front stretch, a headwind as you head into the final sector, and a tailwind as you look to try and chase down the hill. So it's creating a lot of panic for these drivers, and we're seeing these mistakes starting to just creep in that are causing dramas out there. Gap at the front down to 1 second, 1.1 between James Byrne and Jacob Reed, with George Van Rensburg in tow, just as Alex Hagland gets back at Mario Bodlosh and makes it Swedes 5 and 6.
Yeah, I was just trying to check a couple of things on the timing screens, and all of a sudden, Alex Hagland making his way straight up the inside of the car that I'm following out of absolutely nowhere. It's not I think it might be a difference in downforce between those two cars, but Hagland making great use of that DRS, great use of his battery deployment to get up the inside of Bodlosh and take that spot. Already clear by 0.6 of a second. Let's see if he can hold on to that gap as they come through that final sector.
Hits the brakes and now looks to attack through the left and right. We take a look just up in front as we take the traditional camera on board through this very tough off-camber corner. Those two anti-cut curves on the left-hand side stare at you as you then hit the GR Supra corner and look to hit through at Panasonic to give as much of a run as possible through onto the main straight. And this is one of those circuits where if it weren't for the fact that Toyota isn't in Formula One anymore, I'd love to see this back. It ran 4 times in Formula One circles, 07 and 08, as now here comes the move from Mario Bodlos, straight back at Alex Hagland down the inside, and that will be a change for position. But critically, 1976 and 1977, hello James Hunt.
I get the feeling these two are going to be going backwards and forwards for a while, but fortunately for Fuji Speedway, it does still find itself in use in top flight sports cars, as Japan's premier sports car championship, Super GT, still races at the Speedway, and of course the FIA World Endurance Championships makes its annual trip to the circuit once every, oh God, it's going to be September, isn't it? We've just had it. It was another banger of a race, and you can see why, because these guys are going at it just as hard as those World Endurance Championship drivers did last weekend.
Eduardo Rodis, by the way, is pulling that gap over Florian Kammeyer. It's now out to 7 seconds almost at this point. So that's critical to know, because Florian Kammeyer is going to be getting less than what Eduardo Rodis will on those recoveries from the opening lap dramas that they've had. 36 seconds at the moment off of the race lead is Eduardo Rodis. I doubt that gap's going to come down much from it, but the critical fact is, I'm looking around at Mark van Dalen, at Gerard Borrell, at Dennis Branch. I don't think they're safe from Eduardo Rodis if he decides to put the burners on. So I'd say, I reckon about 8th place is possible, barring any incidents.
Well, knowing Eduardo Rodis, anything is going to be possible if he can start to extract some pace out of that car. He doesn't actually hold the fastest lap of the race so far. He's only managed an 18 flat, whereas Florian Kammeyer, just behind him, has gone a whole 1/10 of a second faster, which is an absolute age in Formula One. And of course, having to take that early stop, losing 35 seconds in the pit lane, and then another 10 to get that front wing changed. Realistically, he's only made up about, I want to say, 10 seconds from what he lost at the start of the race. And it's just, it doesn't feel like it's good enough to get himself back in that window. But from what you're saying, Sperry, I think 7th or 8th isn't a bad shout as to where he's going to cycle out, because those are the cars that are 10 seconds or so back from James Byrne as it stands, who, by the way, still out in front, still managing this race brilliantly and keeping it about as fast as he needs to hold Jacob Reed at arm's length.
Here comes George van Rensburg, though, looking to try and get this pass done for second, and isn't going to quite be close enough to make it work. George van Rensburg has been trying time and again, sat on the back of the points leader all time, the driver with the most wins, the most second places, the most pole positions, the most fastest laps out there, and the 2-time reigning champion as well, just to add a little bit more flavour into the broth. But for the moment, Jacob Reed is happy to hold his station. George van Rensburg is hunting down, and they both know that if they continue to push each other at this level, they're going to catch James Byrne.
They certainly might. When you get a slipstream, the car in front does get a little bit of a speed boost as well. So that might be the sort of play that Reed and George van Rensburg are going for. But at this point, I think eyes are turned a little bit more towards potential strategies, as we saw how effective the tyre offset was at Monza. It could be the same sort of game to be played here at Fuji Speedway. James Byrne may be the first car to come down pit lane. It certainly wasn't when we went to Italy for the second time this year, or third time even this year. But it's going to be a case of, where do Reed and Byrne pit relative to each other? Does Reed give himself that tyre offset, suffer on these mediums a little bit longer to go more aggressive on the softs like he did at Monza, and maybe that's how he beats Byrne? Or does he have to try and do it Eduardo Rodis' way, where he's one of the first down pit lane and just tries to get that undercut?
Well, that's the question that will be asked here in these, I would say, foggy style conditions that we've got at the moment. There's just enough of it that's creating a little bit of sight issue out there at this point. In sim time, leading towards the middle of the day, and it's not clearing. Look at this, though, from Mark van Dalen, looking to attack Gerard Borel. This for 8th place overall. Remember, Gerard Borel's best finish in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour is a couple of 9th places.
And it looks like Van Dalen is going to put himself in that spot yet again. The Dutchman is putting all sorts of pressure on Gerard Borel and really making him push. He was so wide on the exit of turn 3, which is a notoriously tight corner anyway. And it's just keeping him right on the edge of grip. He's wearing out his tyres. And there he has a wiggle up the hill yet again and finds himself off the road at 15. And that's going to be all the impetus Mark van Dalen needs to get through as he snatches that 8th spot from Borel.
And now Dennis Branch and Jeffrey Lawler sit then on the rear and say this is what we're capable of as they change again for 6th and 7th. Hagland through on Bodlosh. Borel will be looking behind, but now it's a case as the leaders are together. Jeffrey Lawler moves on up into the top 10 just behind, gets his pass done. So he's got that sorted absolutely wonderfully, but we have to go back to the front of the field as Jason Green becomes the first driver to pit and make his strategy known. We've got James Byrne, a threat behind him, a two-headed threat right now of Jacob Reed and George van Rensburg.
Well, Byrne's been strong through Sector 3 all day long. He might have a chance here just to eke the gap back out to a second, running that slightly higher downforce level than Jacob Reed. It's there or thereabouts. The only way we're going to know for sure as to whether or not Reed has DRS is when we get to that DRS zone. The green lights do not come up on the dashboard. And after giving Reed a double dose of DRS on the previous lap, Byrne has found that extra 5% to get that gap back out to a second and give himself another shot. You can see how much energy is Byrne as his car's already derating as he falls back towards Jacob Reed.
And that's without DRS on the straight. Jacob Reed able to hunt that gap down by half out there overall. So he's really finding this is a tough phase. Look at the differences between them here. Jacob Reed having to lift off a lot more through the very tricky 300 right, 100 right, leading into Advan corner. And so that gap at 0.4 of a second by the time he reaches Coca-Cola corner, it's almost 0.8 of a second here at Dunlop. It's a frustrating game of give and take, and Jacob Reed has the right philosophy here, does the data scientist, which is, if I've got a car that can overtake, that's better than a car that can't.
Well, let's see what happens as we come through Sector 3 yet again as we prepare to tick off the 23rd lap of this race. It's a little bit of a wiggle at 15 that we've seen so often today, that it's going to eke Jacob Reed back outside that DRS window. I think he's been on a bit of a charge on his battery deployment over the last couple of laps to get himself within DRS of James Byrne by the time they get back down to turn 1. And you've got to wonder how many more chances is he going to have of that as Byrne derates, Reed derates. But here comes George van Rensburg, but he doesn't go for it yet.
I think he's wise here, is George. I think he's waiting for this race to come to him rather than him going out and getting it. It's also on, by the way, 4th and 5th. What a run right now Emil Lundell is having as Bodlosh holds off Alex Hagland. Emil Lundell has caught Volta Lux in Volta Lux's favourite position in all of racing, which is 4th place overall. Volta Lux has finished 4th in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour 14 times.
Well, let's see if he can make it 15. It's going to be a bit of a job for him to do that today as Emil Lundell is all over his rear wing as they go down towards that very tricky braking zone down at turn 10. But this is why we love Fuji. So much happening on track all at the same time. It's hard to keep track of it, but somehow we're just about managing as through that final sector they come yet again, snaking all the way up that hill that almost has the vibe of those switchback roads you see on so many mountainsides that have been made famous by countless TV shows coming out of Japan. Onto the straight they come. DRS is going to be available for Emil Lundell. Is Lux going to be able to hold on to that spot? Well, we're about to find out. DRS rear wing flap open as the speed builds and builds and builds up to the top of 8th gear. Lux just holding on for now. Will we see a dive for Lundell down in turn 1? Yes, we will. He gets that overlap, snatches the apex from Lux and takes that 4th place as Lux now becomes the chasing car, but DRS advantage in Lundell's hand.
Absolutely wonderful work from Emil Lundell. His best lap time, by the way, an 18 flat. Comparing that with likes of Jacob Reed, an 18-4. Oh, Dennis Branch throws one down the inside. Mark van Dalen gets that straight back. Jeffrey Lawler was looking at that on the radio, going, oh, that was a bit brave. But Dennis Branch searching for points. He's finished in the points 3 times in his iRacing Grand Prix career, and each time he's finished 8th place for it.
Well, it was an optimistic move from Branch to go that deep into turn 1 to try and hold on to the spot, but thankfully for everyone around him, he saw that gap in the 2 cars in front of him and slotted himself into it and kept everyone nice and clean. But he locks himself out of that top 10 for now as Jacob Reed finds himself within that DRS of James Byrne. He's been so much quicker on these straights over the last few laps. This could be the chance for the move. As look at the closing speed. Byrne pulls to the inside in an effort to defend, but there is nothing he can do as Jacob Reed takes the lead of this race.
I'm not sure whether that was a defence or more rather a concession there from James Byrne, who was struggling to get to 300 kilometres an hour. He did lift off on the straight, and Jacob Reed gets the pass back and now leads. And at this current stage, if it were to finish like it is now, he'd take a full 25 points out of Eduardo Radice, and he would say, I am absolutely back, and I am not giving up the championship with 6 rounds to go.
Well, let's not jump our guns too much. We are only a third of the way into this race, and we've seen how strong Byrne is through this final sector in this entire race so far. As he keeps that gap under a second, he'll have a shot at that DRS on the next lap. But I can imagine that Byrne is going to be on that recharge button, a brand new hybrid mode introduced to these cars in the Season 3 update, where it is just all regen, regen, regen. There will be no battery deployment coming from that car. D-rating very early on. That slipstream DRS is going to give him all the drag reduction he needs to stay with Jacob Reed while still saving that hybrid. He's going to get closer as we make our way down the start-finish straight yet again, but I don't think we're going to see him go for a move. This is going to be a game of patience for Byrne now.
Well, at the moment, the game of patience is a game of go fish at the moment, because that's all he can do. Volta looks fighting back as well in the race on for 4th and 5th. Can't quite get the move on Emil Lundell, and that will keep him preoccupied at the moment at 7.5 seconds off of the race lead. They're forming their own groups of a 1 here and a 2 there as they work themselves together. Good drive then coming out of Advan corner for James Byrne as he hunts on, but Mario Bodlosh here still hasn't given up hopes of a top 5. I think still hasn't given up hopes of a podium, but can't keep the pace going, knowing that he's having to fight Alex Hang the entire time. Van Dalen through 100 right, now trying to go the long way around, and that is a worldie of a pass by the Dutchman on the American.
Ripping the top is something that we see so often in oval racing, but is more often than not assisted by banking. And I promise you, 100R has absolutely nothing. That was pure bravery, pure trust, and pure grit from Van Dalen to carry that speed around the outside and snatch the apex of 6 away from Jeffrey Lawler. He's going to extend the gap through Sector 3, but goodness me, that was one heck of a move.
It was a wonderful pass, and a simply magnificent one at that. Now he's got to defend on the front stretch from Dennis Branch and Jeffrey Lawler, who are there in 10th and 11th, and they'll want to get back. Here's a little serpentine, middle of the road. Jeffrey's just going to go straight to the inside. So all that hard work done at turn 3, well, you can say all for naught.
Yeah, as he's coming under pressure from, well, not fellow countryman of Jeffrey Lawler, Dennis Branch, making his way down the inside of 1 as well. And there was nothing Van Dalen could do to defend from that one. As saying that, Branch finally making that move stick and finding himself in Sim Speed Championship points position. Tim versus Jeffrey Lawler for P9 though, Van Dalen staying with the car in front of him and perhaps looking for a move a little bit later on in this lap.
Well, Eduardo Radice is worth talking about as well. He's now caught the back of Rekov, Pinar and Paul O'Regan. So he's now going to have to start thinking about overtaking some drivers and where's the right place. And one of the toughest skills for any quick driver is to work out where slower drivers are going to be slower over the lap.
It certainly is, but James Byrne going to the inside of turn 1 on Jacob Reed, who made a mistake coming out of turn 16, but the American locking it up late in the turn. He's going to have the DRS advantage and might keep a nose down the inside of Reed. He thinks better of having to go into 3, but Reed's starting to feel a little bit of pressure. We've seen him make those sorts of mistakes before, and that's when he lost the win in Monza. And do you know who he lost it to on that occasion? James Byrne. Can he take advantage again? Well, we're going to wait and have to see.
Well, this is where the top 2 in this race are starting to give a showcase. George Van Rensburg's happily sitting there. The more they scrap like this, I think the bigger threat for these 3 is Emil Lundell, who was consistently faster over the opening stint, and he's within 5 seconds now of George Van Rensburg. If Emil Lundell can go from 17th to win this race, it is simply put the greatest achievement he could possibly find after not setting a lap in qualifying.
I think the only way that that's going to happen is if these 2 take each other off the road. It's not looking likely, but the racing is starting to get feisty at the front of the field. No mistake to assist James Byrne on this occasion, but he will have the DRS again. Both cars losing that hybrid deployment at the end of the straight. Byrne's going to lift off nice and early to try and get some of that battery back. Van Rensburg diving it all the way down into turn 1, but not taking a spot. Mario Bodlosh, first of the top 10 really, to come down pit lane, and that is actually quite an early stop.
Lap 30 of 67 to make that stop. Emil Lundell has taken 2 seconds out of your leader in the last 3 laps of this race. He is the threat at this moment in time, but with Bodlosh in the pits, here is Eduardo Radice, championship leader, trying to figure out a way to outbrake Sebastian Rekov for position. He'll then have Lyle Pienaar, the South African, then Paul O'Regan, missed the top 10. He's in the train, and now he's got to find the pass.
He certainly does, but with all that DRS in this train, it's going to hold everyone pretty much where they are, as Radice is on some pretty aged soft tyres at the moment, as they are only 1 lap younger than the mediums in front of him. And as we know, those soft compound tyres wear a good chunk faster than the medium, so they are nowhere near their optimum pace, as he's going to struggle to find a way past Rekov through the final sector, but it's going to have to be that run down to turn 1. He wants to try and make a move, but Rekov joining him on that medium downforce package and will have the advantage of DRS.
Yeah, and of course, because there's DRS for the car in front, being Lyle Pienaar, it becomes exponentially harder. Rekov can't get a great run out of the GR Supra corner at Panasonic. He struggles a bit. A tiny correction of oversteer then for Eduardo Radice. The DRS light will be on. He's at full bore, but will Sebastian Rekov have enough to fend this off? Here comes Eduardo Radice, and this one should be easy on the inside. He'll get 1. Will he eye up 2? He'll only get 1 into TGR corner, and as such, it's now Lyle Pienaar who's got to play the defensive track.
Yeah, nice move from Eduardo Radice to just get it down the inside of turn 1 there. And it's a relatively slow overtake on the straight from what we've seen so far in this race. But of course, a lot of cars that have been getting past on DRS. The car in front certainly hasn't had it, as the lead 2 make their way onto the start-finish straight. Yet again, Byrne may have a chance to attack, but it's going to be a long run down into 1 against a car that has much higher top-end speed than your chasing F1 car, as the speed builds and builds. But Byrne losing speed so early on in the straight. Again, look how early he's lifting. That is all lift and coast, that nothing to do with the hybrid cutting out. Byrne is playing a game of patience here. I think he thinks he can save tyre, extend this stint, and try and come back at Reed later on in this race.
Emil's overcooked himself at turn 1. He'll drop a couple seconds. Volta looks now, hits the lane at the end of lap 31. That's about on par with what we were expecting his strategy call to be made. Remember, Mario Bodlosh is the big key for him in terms of where he comes out of the pit. So that's in mind. Radice now into the top 10 as looks to depart. Fastest lap for Mario Bodlosh as he crosses the line. That getting by Florian Kammeier, and looks is only just ahead of his Austrian compatriot. Bodlosh with a big wiggle through TGR corner.
Yeah, it's a mega start to the stint for Bodlosh, but it was an even bigger end of the stint for Volta Lux. We've seeing now just how advantageous a fresh pair or a fresh set of soft tires can be for getting that undercut. Paulo Reagan has made his way off pit lane. So these drivers now informing the rest of the field exactly how fast those soft tires can go. And does it make a change of strategy for Jacob Reed, James Byrne, or George Van Rensburg? Honestly, if it was me, if I was Van Rensburg, I'd be jumping onto those softs roundabout now and seeing if I can get in front of both of these two in front of me. They're not scrapping, but they are certainly slowing each other down just a touch.
Compared to fastest lap and current lap, Jacob Reed was 1.4 seconds slower than Mario Bodlosh. If you think George Van Rensburg's got similar pace, I'd argue he only needs 1 lap's overspeed to go and get himself ahead of Byrne and of Reed as and when they pit. Of course, he'd have to pay the piper later on the brakes into the Dunlop hairpin at the halfway stage of this race. It's now, how do you set this second half of the race up? Mario Bodlosh then through on Volta Lux, the two Austrians battling out there together, knowing next up will be Rekov Pina and of course Eduardo Radice, who is there in that group trying to keep his pace up before he makes his second stop of the day, which would be moving on to another set of soft tyres.
Van Rensburg losing a lot of time in that final sector, and he does decide to come down pit lane, where we've seen the advantage of those fresh softs at about 1.4 seconds. That was the gap to Jacob Reed when he decided to make that turn down pit lane. He's going to come to a stop. He's going to get up on those jacks and get some fresh, soft compound tires. And we'll see if he comes out in enough clean air to try and pull the advantage over the lead two. And now there's going to be a question of do those two react to George Van Rensburg as he finally gets down into his pit box and gets rolling yet again. It's going to be tricky to get out in clean air, as I think he's just going to get in front of Eduardo Radice and give himself a bit of space.
Oh,
to
black
the likes
flag.
of Dennis Potter, Jeffrey Lawler, as Jared Burrell, picking up the red flag, speeding on entry, surely.
Yeah, that is. And so as he jumped into the pits, he tried to hit his mark. He missed it. He locked it up so much. Look at this. He's desperate. Please, slow, 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 slow. He locks it up so much. He hits the concrete pit gantry there on the inside. So for Gerard Burrell hitting the pit wall on the inside, he's going to have to wait an extra 40 seconds.
Yeah, such a tricky pit entry down here as well when you're braking from such high speed all the way down to 60 kilometers an hour. James Byrne faking pit entry to try and pull Jacob Reed in. And I think, to me, that tells me exactly what Byrne is trying to do. I think he wants the extension of this stint and the shorter run on the softs, and he's trying to bait Reed into it as Florian Kalmeier comes out alongside your race leader, but slows both of the top two cars down. And Byrne is going to have to work hard to get that gap closed yet again.
That's the second stop for Florian Kalmeier. George Van Rensburg, by comparison, has come out just ahead of Eduardo Radice.
Yes, he has. And like I said, it has given him the clean air to start to really push those soft compound tires as he comes across the start-finish line for the end of his outlap of 48.7, which isn't going to be too representative for now, but we are just waiting this one lap to see what sort of pace the South African can do on the softs. Eduardo Radice coming down pit lane to make that second and probably final stop of the race. But when are Reed and Byrne going to come in? We know they like to go long on that first stint. I think we're going to see that again here today.
Well, it's Reed, it's Byrne, it's Hagland, and it is Emil Lundell. Those are the four who have yet to pit, and this is where it gets very awkward because Florian Kalmeier was desperate to get through. One in, one out. James Byrne bites the bullet and says, right, I'm going to have to come in and try and undercut here, and he is very pedestrian on the line at just 60 kilometers an hour. So Jacob Reed, if he wants to hold, I think he's going to have to be very aggressive on pit entry.
He certainly is. I think he's got a little bit of traffic coming up in front of him, as well as Lyle Pina finds himself only a couple of seconds up the road from the race leader. But the one thing that I'm keeping an eye on right now is that gap between James Byrne and George Van Rensburg. It will be the soft compound tires for your previous race leader, as he's going to try and get out in front of the South Africa, but he's not gonna, because here comes George Van Rensburg getting well clear of Byrne on pit exit. Almost 2 seconds advantage.
That's big for George van Rensburg, a driver who has been plying his trade, looking for points. He got a podium for the first time in 3 years earlier on at Zandvoort this season, and he could be eyeing up an all-important race victory for the first time ever at this stage. But he needs Jacob Reed in play, and Jacob Reed has got to be very careful behind that Florian Kammeier doesn't run him over. A wise choice by Jacob Reed, the champion, the two-time reigning champion, to now hit pit lane.
Yeah, not quite your championship leader, Sperry, but Reed making his way down pit lane for the first and what should be only time. I think he's seen the sorts of lap times that the soft runners are setting, and he's panicking a little bit. He's making that choice to come down probably a little bit earlier than he wanted to. But George van Rensburg being 1.5 seconds ahead of James Byrne means he's gained about 3 seconds in the pit stop cycle. So as Reed is coming down to his pit box, here comes van Rensburg on the racetrack at full speed. He is going to be well clear of your previous race leader, and Reed, I think, is going to drop down to third because Byrne's tyres are actually going to have temperature.
Well, if Jacob Reed can hold second, this would be critical, and he's got the headway ahead of James Byrne. Now it's about drive and getting those tyres into that operating window. They're held at 80 degrees Celsius in the tyre blankets, but they drop so much heat coming off the blankets that you've just got to put the wear and the tyre temp back into them as you go out. Critical between them. Emil Lundell and Alex Hagland, the only two who haven't yet come down in and made their stop. James Byrne close, but not close enough at the moment. Emil Lundell will stay out for another lap. Will his compatriot Alex Hagland follow as Florian Kammeier sets the fastest lap of the race?
Yeah, 16.7 is an absolutely mega lap from Florian Kammeier. At the moment, it's not going to go anywhere for him. But again, it keeps informing the drivers in front just how fast he can go. Paul O'Regan finding himself back inside that top 10. But Mark Van Dalen is going to want to snatch that one SimSpeed championship point off him as quickly as he can. Let's see if he's going to have a chance. Down into turn 10. He's not going to go for it. And will show a bit of patience and go later on in the lap. Just keeping an eye at the front of the field as well as Byrne is still showing some patience in making his way by. So I think we've reached that phase of the race, Sperry, where everyone's just starting to breathe a little bit.
I don't think so, because you've got Eduardo Rodis. He's got to get through the next 4 cars, which are split by 3 seconds in front of him. I reckon he can get to 8th. That's Jeffrey Lawler. But it's then a full 27 seconds to Volta Lux. He won't catch that down. It might be a day where he's only fighting for 4 SimSpeed Championship points, but we count about how important 4 are. He might get both of them at the same time. 3 wide on the front stretch. Eduardo Rodis, bully, gets it done. Van Dalen, straight back down the inside. I don't care if you lead the championship. I'm fighting.
What a comeback from Mark Van Dalen down into 1. Seeing Rodis sweep to the inside of both him and, goodness, who was it in all of that? Him and Paul O'Regan to snatch that position back. It was brave, it was ballsy, and he got it done.
Well, that's all he needed to do, and he did it so astutely as well, knowing he's got confidence in the downforce. He has had a podium this season, and now we got to go to James Byrne because he's got the run on Jacob Reed now, heading towards TGR corner, turn number 1, or Daiichi, as it's known in Japanese. Easy pass.
Yeah, this time actually getting it stopped down at the apex and no late corner lockup. Reed is going to come back at him on the run down to turn 3, but it's not enough overspeed to take that position.
Oh, La Pina.
Well, Pina's going to go off, but it's a fastest sector 1 for James Byrne this time by, as he's actually close 0.4 of a second on George van Rensburg already.
Yeah, there was contact between Pienaar and Kammeier, and Lyle Pienaar has found himself off the road and in the pits, and I wonder whether that is suspension damage that has caused the retirement of Lyle Pienaar, the South African, from this race. A real shame if that is the case, but we've got brilliant battles pretty much everywhere. Rodis gets his pass done on Mark Van Dalen, and now he will be set to try and chase down Dennis Branch and Jeffrey Lawler. And speaking of drivers who are set, I tell you what, James Byrne, he has halved that gap down to George van Rensburg immediately.
Purple sector 1, purple sector 2 and clear of the DRS on Jacob Reed. I think we're seeing another case of Reed struggling to keep that soft compound tire alive, as it's Byrne who has the turn of pace on tires that are only 2 laps younger than George van Rensburg in front. This is the time for the South Africans to turn up the wick and try and find a little bit more pace, because it seems at this point that James Byrne might be inevitable for this race win.
All the while, you got Mario Bodlosh a couple seconds back of Jacob Reed. Volta Lux is there as well. The 2 Austrians aren't fully out of this race either, in 4th and 5th position net, because you still got Emil Lundell to pit, you still got Alex Hagelin to pit, and they're going to cycle back into the group. Questions going to be asked, though, where they cycle into the group and how much of an offset have they got?
Well, it's going to be relatively significant as Emil Lundell makes his way... Emil Lundell
Hagelin too
makes his way down pit lane, and Hagelin follows close behind. It'll be a 6-lap offset from your current race leader, 10 laps from Mario Bodlosh, so it'll be a good chunk relative to your driver in 6th place, but not so much for the race lead. We'll see what they could do late on, as I don't think these softs quite keep their life as... Well, they nowhere near keep their life as long as the mediums, and as much as they can get 30 or so laps at decent pace, you do take the edge off them in the first 5 laps or so.
George van Rensburg leads in Fuji. James Byrne and Jacob Reed are giving the hunt behind with 1 SimSpeed Championship point. Eduardo Radice finds himself in 10th, but he wants 9th out there now because he's got his sights set on Dennis Branch in front of him.
Yeah, he does, and I'm trying to see if he's got the advantage of DRS on the run down towards turn 1.
Yeah.
He is. That flap is open, and look at the overspeed as he clears Branch way before the braking zone for turn 1. Doesn't even have to make his way back over to the edge of the circuit. Just covers off the middle of the road, takes that spot. 4.9 seconds now to Jeffrey Lawler, and it certainly looks doable.
Taylor, 43 kilometers an hour difference on the main straight.
Yeah, one of the tricks to going fast in these cars is being able to manage that hybrid and make sure you've got that 170 bonus electrical motor horsepower there and ready to be used. And that is one thing that the likes of Byrne, Reed, Lundell, Radice are very good at. And we've seen the likes of Lawler and Branch struggle with it in the earlier phases of this championship. Pair that with the DRS advantage for Radice. Pair that with the extra big rear wing on Dennis Branch's car, and you do get a speed differential as big as 43 k's.
You do. Volta looks into his favourite place of them all, 4th place, as he gets by Mario Bodlosh. These two have got to work to stay with Jacob Reed, with James Byrne, with George van Rensburg, your race leader. It's half a second now, the gap at the front of the field, and George knows it at this moment. There's Eduardo Radice in 9th place, and he sees Dennis Branch there. He can't get close enough to get back at Eduardo at this stage, with Mark van Dalen, with Paul O'Regan all there. Jeffrey Lawler's next, and that's only 5 seconds down the road or so, and then it's 11 to Alex Hagelin. So 7th, I think, is a dangling dream at the moment for Eduardo Radice, but he's running out of time. It'll be 25 laps to go at the line between these two, George van Rensburg and James Byrne. James on what has been a darling first season against George van Rensburg, who's going from strength to strength. Here comes the launch. It's battery versus battery. Here comes James Byrne to the inside, and James Byrne leads here in Fuji.
Early on in the straight, it looked like it was advantage Van Rensburg, but as soon as that DRS flap opened for James Byrne and Van Rensburg battery ran out, it was all but said and done, as the American just pulling up alongside in the braking zone and taking that spot. He's now got the challenge of extending that gap to over a second before they get to the braking zone for turn 16. It's already at 7/10, and there are quite a few corners to go before he gets there.
But remember, you got that hefty braking zone here at Dunlop, which can claw that gap down to half a second, and manages to do so. Back up on the straight, you need that confidence to run through. It's off camber through here, you're on a tightrope, 0.8 of a second, it finds itself 0.9 of a second, 1.1's the click as they go over. I don't think he's going to have DRS when he needs it the most here. There's George van Rensburg, and Jacob Reed at 0.7 of a second might say, howdy, I'm going to bring myself back into this race by knowing exactly what I've got, which is better tyres than you, George.
DRS open yet again for Jacob Reed, trying to claw back some SimSpeed Championship points on Eduardo Rodis. It's not going to be enough to close in on this occasion, but Van Rensburg finds himself back within DRS range of your race leader, James Byrne. It's not going to be enough to get down the inside of turn 3, as we've seen all race so far, but it's just enough to stay within touching distance of that race lead. And of course, Van Rensburg being there brings with him Jacob Reed.
And Eduardo Rodis gets the pass done on Jeffrey Lawler as Lawler drops 4 seconds over the course of the lap. That's a mistake. Then at the GR Supra corner, turn 15, out on track, he just loses it on the exit, and a freebie for Eduardo Rodis. He now has 4 SimSpeed Championship points, and maybe the best 4 he may ever score in a SimSpeed Championship.
Yeah, it's going to certainly lighten the load of that point swing, as Reed only scoring, off the top of my head, 15 points. So it makes that swing 11 points in Reed's favor, which, well, there you go, which barely makes a dent in Eduardo Rodis' current championship lead. Of course, we'll see how it unfolds over the closing stages of the season, but it's certainly looking like Rodis has one hand on the championship, unless something goes horribly wrong in the next 20 laps or so.
So from this point on, Jacob Reed's got to take, on average, 14 points a race out of Eduardo Rodis. Now that sounds massive in terms of comparison, but now as he moves through up into second position, the difference between second and 8th place is exactly 14 points, which will get the job done as far as that's concerned, to get those points back in play. So this is the path for the course he's been hoping for.
And don't you just love how it works out like that sometimes, as Reed, within a second of James Byrne yet again, as actually a race leader is closing in on Gerard Burrell, who's been quick all race long, but now finds himself down in 15th. It might even give James Byrne the advantage of DRS on that start-finish straight, as he was a touch wide, I think, through turn 13, but still faster than Jacob Reed behind. He has closed within a second of that lap-down car, and Burrell will get shown those blue flags and should theoretically dutifully move out of the way. Of course, there is a difference between the blue flags that we abide by in iRacing and the blue flags that are shown in real life in F1, where in real life they are an instruction, in iRacing they are just informative.
It is the case in real-world Formula 1. You've got 4 marshal posts to move out of the way before you get penalised for ignoring blue flags. Here they are advisory, and so Gerard Burrell will give a double dose of DRS and will allow James Byrne through at the Coca-Cola corner, and Jacob Reed will see then going through at 100 right, the pass that he desperately needs. It's a case of you're going to have to try and hold on, and for the moment it's a case of tuning in and saying, can you find your inner Richard Carapaz out inside you that Jacob Reed's looking for right now, because he needs to do what the Olympic gold medalist did over in Tokyo to make sure that that will be the way he wants to get this move all set and sorted. Change further down the order, Florian Kammeyer now up to 13th.
I think that might be one of the most niche references I've ever heard you make on one of these broadcasts. That's impressive. But Reed, I'm just having to think about Reed getting through that traffic of Gerard Burrell. And as much as Burrell did move out of the way off the racing line, it still introduced a bit of time loss for Jacob Reed, because, yeah, the car in front of you is giving you the preferred racing line and giving you a lot of clean air to eat into. But you're still going to be that little bit hesitant of a car that's slow in front of you. So you might want to keep an eye on that racing line, but you've got to keep another one on the slow car in case it, for some reason, does anything unexpected. And it can introduce just a little bit of hesitation into your driving, and that contributed to a touch of that time loss we saw on the previous lap for Jacob Reed.
Mario Bodlosh loses the place to Emil Lundell. A third stop on the day for Jason Green. 6 seconds he spends in the box. So that then for Jason has been a tough day, and he's still hoping for his first SimSpeed Championship point of the season. He's got so many starts, in fact most starts this season, without a point scored at all. Emil Lundell now into your top 5 and only a couple seconds off of Volta Lux, but I don't think he's got all the pace to say he can chase back up. He's very much even keel still with the likes of James Byrne and Jacob Reed, so I think Lux is about as far as Lundell can go.
Well, let's wait and find out. The hard way is you can never say never when 3 drivers as fast as Byrne, Reed and Rensburg are fighting at the front of the field. Lundell's still got some work to do if he wants to catch up and overtake Volta Lux, but of course he has that tyre offset on the Austrian, where by the time we get to the next 10 laps or so, Lundell is going to have a good chunk fresher tyres and be able to extract just a little bit more pace out of those Pirelli soft compound tyres. But for now, Lux has a good amount of clean air in front of him and is giving just enough dirty air to Emil Lundell to make him slow down a little bit, and it's just keeping the speed at arm's length for now.
Just about, and that's critical. This is what happened between Lyle Pinar and Florian Kammeyer up the hill for the off-camber corner. It's the tiniest tap front to rear, and it's all it takes to demolish the suspension.
Wow, that is surprising to say the least. Of course, these cars are built to go fast and be ultra light, but for the suspension to take a knock like that and be completely broken, that is, wow, I've never seen anything like that before.
Well, here's the thing, took the knock on the front right and the front left suspension broke.
Yeah, it was both of them, especially once that car ended up in the barrier.
Wow. Lyle Pinar will be very unlucky today and finds himself in trouble and out. And I think Jason Green is a couple laps down as well, trying to find a finish. 1.1 was the gap over the line. Jacob Reed has dropped George van Rensburg, who can't do much to hold on at this stage, and he'll now try and stave off a podium at this moment in time. But it's James and Jacob, exactly the race that we had last time we were with you at Monza. Of course, we've had Aragon between that, but it's all about prowess. Who's got enough prowess to make this happen? James Byrne looking for his second win in the Grand Prix World Tour. Jacob Reed, who has done it so many times before. This for career win number 24.
Well, this is what we saw in the first stint of the race, where Byrne was managing the pace to hold Reed just at arm's length as they made their way onto that DRS straight on the run down to turn 1 on every single lap. But eventually, that bit of pace advantage he had started to run out, and that's around the time when Reed was able to get within 7, 6, 5 tenths of a second at the apex of turn 1, because he got that DRS out of turn 1 down into 3. And it just brought that car closer and closer. And as much as the time loss in the middle and final sector was still the same, it kept him within a much tighter window of Byrne. And that's how he eventually got through. We'll see it yet again here as Reed closes to within half a second. But Byrne will hold on to the spot for now. But it's going to be a tricky job for him to hold on to that.
18 laps to go. Emil Lundell is giving Volta Lux kittens at the moment. Which way do you go? He's not going to make it into turn 3. It's a one-line suits all corner in these cars, and he'll have to play patience once more to try and work this out. This is where the tyres are going to come into play for Emil Lundell. These final 10 laps or so, when everyone's critically at their limit with the soft compound, this is where he's going to wake up. Volta Lux now is going to have to think very carefully about where he deploys. There's not going to be a move down into the Dunlop hairpin, but up the hill, Emil is all over him.
Well, the advantage that Lux is going to have here is the difference in downforce levels between the two cars. We've seen how well all race long this medium downforce package can hang on to the spot, even if the car behind has the advantage of DRS and a good bit of deployment. We'll see how it shakes itself out this time as Lundell right under the rear wing of Volta Lux, but watch how the Austrian pulls away on the way out of the corner. But that DRS flap is going to open, give Lundell that 15 or so kilometers an hour extra top end speed as he'll move to the inside of Volta Lux, and he'll be on the inside on the brakes, then snatch that spot but Lux might have the chance to come back. We'll just have to see what happens in the next sector or so.
Critically, there are places in the world like Spa, for example, and the Kemmel Straight, where the difference between medium and high downforce is medium and low downforce is night and day, and you've got to go low downforce. Emil Lundell proving not so much here at Fuji, gets the move done, and now with Gerard Burrell, the lap traffic in between, he can try and play leapfrog over to George van Rensburg, then leapfrog to Jacob Reed and James Byrne, who are battling it out for the race lead as it currently stands. 7/10 of a second between them, dancing through turn 13. James Byrne with a little wiggle there as he was not too comfortable putting the power on the exit here, but again, 9/10 of a second out of GR Supra and into Panasonic. He just pins it on rails.
It's going to be so marginal as to whether Reed got that or not, and this time he didn't yet again. The gap out at 1.1 second as they make their way down the start-finish straight, but Reed is going to close in and close in and close in. He won't be close enough to go for a move. Both of the cars coming off that hybrid very early on the straight, but that gap within half a second, yet again, Byrne needs to start running, and I think he needs some traffic in that final sector to help him out.
Volta looks with a massive turn of pace, goes back against Emil Lundell, and now's going to get the drive and an absolute world of pace. This is Emil's nightmare now, because he can't get the clearance he needs, and he needs to do something at an alternative place to now give him everything he wants, which is the time to run forward.
Yeah, Lundell wanted a shot at that top three. He's still got some time to get it done, as we're still 15 laps from the end of this race. Lux is going to have the top speed advantage on the way down towards turn 10, and Lundell won't be able to get by, but we're going to see a repeat of what we saw 2 laps ago, where Emil Lundell is going to stick under the rear wing of Volta Lux, then open that DRS on the start-finish straight and fly down the inside. Will Lux defend from it this time? Well, give it about 30 seconds and you'll find out.
And the gap 1.3, 1.4. James Byrne again turns the screw, and Jacob Reed's got nothing for it at the front. And these, massive wiggle of oversteer. Emil has to catch the steering wheel of his Mercedes W13. And just now, that could be the moment where Emil's hopes of a podium or even a victory could go up in smoke, as he knows that Volta is going to fight with everything he's got. Big throw down the inside at turn 1 to say a big "that's mine" as he gets it done.
Yeah, Volta looks very much setting the tone for this battle a lap ago when he threw it right at the inside of Lundell to snatch that spot back. But the thing about Emil Lundell is he can dish it out just as well as he can take it. 0.6 of a second is that gap already. He might be able to clear DRS and pick some DRS up off Gerard Burrell on the start-finish straight this time, and might finally hold on to that spot and have that run at 3rd place.
Now, here's my next question, Taylor. How much of this is James Byrne keeping Jacob Reed at an arm's length, or how much of this is Jacob Reed toying with the idea of not wanting to show his hand?
It's got to be 50-50, Sperry. We've seen how quick Byrne can be. Remember how much of a statement that victory at Monza was, as Reed still isn't going to have that DRS. And the thing about Reed is he just hasn't looked fast enough today. Yet again, he's managed to get himself within the window and did take the spot at the end of the last stint. But what we saw after that was a lot of James Byrne catching back up, but playing it safe the entire way. It was big lift and coast down into turn 1. It was just staying within that window and keeping himself alive. So to me, I think this is Byrne's race to lose, because I think Reed's going to run out of steam a little bit.
James Byrne, last lap, 117.6. Emil Lundell, 116.3.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it? 1.3 seconds faster. He's going to use that pace advantage to close within a good couple of seconds of George van Rensburg. And even though the South African's been comfortably up inside that top 3 all day long, with that pressure, that looming threat of Emil Lundell behind, van Rensburg really has to find another gear here. These cars have 8s, and you'd think that would be enough, but if van Rensburg can find 9th, that's the only thing that I think is going to keep him in front of Lundell, because there goes another 0.6 of a second.
Is evaporating here on lap 51, 1.1 seconds. On lap 53, 1.3 seconds. And that gap, which was 2.7 when they last crossed the line is now down to just 1.4 seconds only. He is running with everything he's got here as Emil Lundell. You can see that he took another 9 tenths to 17 flat with no DRS as in again goes Jason Green into the pit. This is a real chase right now, and George van Rensburg, I think, is too far away to see this one go the way he wants to. He's going to have to hold on for everything he's got.
Yeah, he's got 14 laps if he wants to hang on to that position, and Lundell isn't going to take that long to get on the tail and get that overtake done. He's got no Gerard Borel in front of him to keep him off the back of van Rensburg. It is just a straight fight between a previous race winner this season and George van Rensburg. He wants to hold on to that podium position, but Lundell is not going to make it easy for him.
And so too is the battle for the final points position. And I'd say this is a 3-car scrap at the moment, Taylor, between Dennis Branch, Paul O'Regan, and 6 seconds down the road, Florian Kameyer looking to get any points to hold on to third in the championship.
Yeah, we should touch on Florian Kameyer just a second, as it's really not been his day out here today, getting involved in an incident early on and being one of three cars even, to be on a 2+ stop strategy. And even then, he doesn't really have the pace to get onto the back of Branch and O'Regan. 6 seconds off the back, but has only been 1/10 of a second faster than Dennis Branch on the last couple of laps or so.
And that, I think, tells you all you need to know about Florian's day. He has been a driver who was so good in the early part of the season. From about rounds 4 to round 9, he was the driver with the most points scored when everyone was playing hot potato with the victories. But the moment that it stepped up to the plate from the likes of Eduardo Radice and Jacob Reed, he hasn't been able to match, and it's been tough. James Byrne has gone really well this season. He's had some races where he's done fantastically, others where he's just picked up a couple points here and there, but now he's starting to show that he's got title credentials next season if he wants to go about it the right way. Jacob Reed is having to really give everything he can to hold, and he might have DRS this time.
He snatched the tighter line through turn 16 as well to get within that DRS window of James Byrne. It isn't the fastest way to get through the corner, but it's a very good way to take a couple of tenths of a second out of the car in front. It's the DRS to the inside of turn 1, and it's like James Byrne is stood still. So the question here is now, that pace that we saw from Byrne last stint to stay with Reed, can he now use it to overtake? Because he has to.
And the threat behind still looms, because Emil Lundell is on the back of George van Rensburg with 11 laps to go here at Fuji. This is a critical moment of the race because Emil needs to get this done, and he needs to get this done immediately.
I don't really think there's too much rush for Lundell, as it's going to be a low percentage chance of him getting into the top 2 as Reed goes deep down at turn 10. But if he wants to get that 3rd place, all he needs to do is wait for that start finish straight yet again and use the DRS to slot his way by George van Rensburg, who really seems to be running out of tyre at this phase of the stint, and that's with 10 laps to go in the race. I don't think van Rensburg is going to lose many more spots than that, but it should be easy pickings from Emil Lundell as they almost come together at 15. Through the final corner they come. It's a wide line for Lundell, and he's going to get a good run out of the exit. Has to avoid van Rensburg at the exit curb, but here comes that DRS.
And here comes the chance to get to 3rd place. Of course, there was a bout of food poisoning one year for Mark Webber around this place. I'd feel sick if I was George van Rensburg right now. It's to the outside goes Emil Lundell, and he just commands it under braking and says, "You've got nothing for me, George. My podium from 17th on the grid."
Emil Lundell has been so good on the brakes all race long, and he's shown that yet again by out-braking van Rensburg on the outside of the circuit. Van Rensburg just not able to hold it down there on the tighter inside line as he's just dropping back 10th by 10th by 10th. That dirty air really affecting how he gets around the track. But here we are, back with Jacob Reed and James Byrne at the front of the field. And it's Byrne who now has a great chance to save some energy and try to make a lunge later on in this race.
it might not be a case of if you make the move. It might be a case for James Byrne of when you try it. It could be a case of waiting for the final lap here and holding Jacob Reed, dangle him out like a carrot on a stick and say, you do the donkey work, keep Emil Lundell away from us, and I will try and take my victory as and when it comes. DRS at full bore along the main straight here, heading over towards turn number 1. They've already passed the start-finish line, and there's not going to be a look into turn number 1 yet. James Byrne knows better than to do that at this moment, and he'll be looking for that second win of the season. Jacob Reed is now knowing he is in a must-win situation. He will feel like every race right now is must-win with his championship predicament.
Yeah, it certainly is, but this is a great advantage to take some points off Eduardo Rodis in his championship lead, and he needs to hang on to this spot. But it's been a little bit of an up and down season for Reed. He's had chances to do this before, but has ended up off the road and out the race. I feel like for him, he's got to just make the safe, smart decision and stay in this race. If Byrne goes for a ballsy dive down into turn 1, I think if I'm Jacob Reed, you've got to let it go.
Keep an eye as well on the fading Mario Bodlosh, because that is the gap that's being hunted down by Alex Hagland, and he is right there. This one for 6th and 7th positions here, and Alex Hagland would love the points with no Edward Apari. REE here today to worry about. I think he'll actually be quite happy with where he is jumping up. He'll move him to at least 8th place overall, and he'll have eyes of getting by Emil Bernstorff as well by the end of the season to go to 6th. He's fighting George van Rensburg effectively for 6th place in the championship.
Yes, he is, but I'm still keeping an eye on this fight at the front of the field, because this is, I think for me, where the most intrigue is in these final, 7 or so laps after this one. Just from where both of these cars have been coming off that hybrid deployment and how close Byrne has been, I think if he just pushes it up into attack mode for one lap, that extra speed he's going to have relative to your race leader is going to be enough to get in there and get him past, but he's got to do it at the right time, because as it stands, both of these cars are pretty much doing the same thing on the deployment. None of them are really gaining anything over each other, and if Byrne doesn't try something different, this battle's going to stagnate, and I think he loses this race win.
I think James Byrne has to go all the way back here, Taylor, to the start of this race and the amazing launch that he had to go from 5th to 2nd to fight for the race lead at turn 1. I think that's where he has to say it gave him the platform, and everything else outside of that has been gravy at this point. Jacob Reed, who's been the pole sitter, won here last year, knows how to win here at Fuji, is now going to have to go and do so again. Both drivers harvesting battery as they need every single watt available to them to go and put in the last stages. It's going to be a hold between them for the time being. Alex Hagland with DRS. There's not much that you can do. Mario doesn't look so super anymore. There goes the pass.
Yeah, straight down the inside with the advantage of DRS, and it's a great move from Hagland, who finally finds himself back within the top 6 after a disastrous start to this race. But just being consistent and using that pace that he's found in the latter half of this season to get past, as you said, the fade in Mario Bodlosh, who looked so strong at the start of this race, but just hasn't really had anything on this second stint.
Of course, he was the first to come in on his set of soft tyres, and he pays the price by not having any tyre left to fight with in the final stages. And Jacob Reed will now see that clock tick over and see 6 laps to go here at Fuji. He knows how critical this race has been. He knows that he wants this one more than anything else. A 3rd straight title would do him wonders, but he's got to try and pull back a nigh on impossible points total against Eduardo Rodis, who knocked his front wing on the opening lap of this race, who gave the door opening up to Jacob Reed on the strongest strength of field that the Grand Prix World Tour has seen.
Yeah, so as much as we always talk about those Sim Speed Championship points, the strength of field this high is great for the iRacing Championship points as well, as you score them relative to what the strength of field is. So, oh no, it's a spin! It's a spin for James Byrne. He finds himself on the curb, on the entry and the outside of turn 6, logs up the rear axle, and it's a half spin through the corner. That means he's going to lose 5.5 seconds to Jacob Reed, and it's going to have damaged those soft tires And now he's got Emil Lundell to worry about. But the chance at that race win has slipped away in the closing stages.
For James Byrne, that is the difference between champion and challenger out there at this stage. He knew he had that one close. He knew he had the opportunity and the tools to win this race. One wrong move, so close to the end of time. And that one pretty much says all you need to know about how difficult this circuit is. Running through 100 right, replay on board. He moves over to the right and he's only just caught it. You can see there where the dirt's come across the curb and that's where it's got slippy.
It's exactly the same mistake that Bodlosh made, and after that his race went completely downhill, and Byrne is going to be hoping for less of the same as we move into the final 5 laps of this race. And Lundell just still chipping away at that gap between him and Byrne. 1.2 seconds as it stands. Pace advantage in Lundell's favor. He might be able to have a go on DRS this time by.
He might do. Mario Bodlosh still within half a second of Alex Hagland here. Hagland's desperately trying to get rid of him, but Bodlosh is using the DRS very well. And Dennis Branch still fighting for one championship point with Mr. Top 10, Paul O'Regan. Paul always has a knack of finding the top 10. He can't get much closer than this without jumping into it.
He certainly can't, and it hasn't really been his race today either, with so many of the regulars that we're saying that about. But he is inching closer and closer to Dennis Branch as the laps go on. On average, he's about a 10th of a second faster than the car in front of him. And he's going to get that DRS on the run down to turn 1 this time by, unless Branch on a slightly higher downforce level could pull that gap back out to a second. O'Regan's on slightly older tyres than Branch as well, so he's going to be struggling to get the same pace out of that car. But in the last 4 laps, anything can happen.
Well, I've just taken a look at James Byrne and Emil Lundell's last couple of the last lap here, Taylor. James Byrne did a 118.056. Emil Lundell did a 118.056.
Then maybe that's going to be enough for Byrne to hold on to that spot as he has a touch of oversteer coming through turn 7. And you can see very clearly that that slide he had is affecting the performance of these soft tyres, as he isn't quite able to get the same demand out of that rear axle as he has done all race long. We'll see if Lundell can get that gap closed down and make that move stick. These two are running similar downforce levels, so if it comes to DRS, it's going to be advantage well in Lundell's favour.
And that advantage for Emil after starting without qualifying the car in 17th, having contact with Reynaldo Augusto on the opening lap of the race and still having enough to fight with late on. He could still yet take second place. He's got the fastest lap in his back pocket, and that's the difference there. 4/10 on that lap. It's down to 1.2 the gap and just 3 laps left in this race. They've got traffic in front in the form of Mark van Dalen, who's in 14th position. So that's next to try and clear for them. And I tell you what, that is solace for the likes of James Byrne at this moment. Mario Bodlosh still on the back of Alex Hagland and still can't reach.
Yeah, James Byrne Lundell hasn't been able to snatch the DRS from Byrne as of yet. But as he inches closer and closer, Byrne making his way up to that back marker of Mark van Dalen is actually going to help him out a little bit, as you said. But we are still looking at this fight for that final SimSpeed Championship point. Paul O'Regan trying to claw something out of what has been a very quiet race for the Englishman as he gets closer and closer and closer on the straight, but there is nothing he can do this time by down into turn 1. And Sperry, he is running out of chances.
And what's worse here is that Mark van Dalen doesn't move, and that gives Emil Lundell a chance, but there's DRS available for James Byrne. He's able to break away. Now here's the double toe then for Emil Lundell. He'll get one. He'll have to be very quick back into line if Mark van Dalen plays this properly. Back into line you go then, Emil. He's too slow on it. He won't go and make the move, but now he is over him like a rash with 2 laps to go in this race. James Byrne second place, which he has been second place so far in this season, a total of an amazing 4 times. He's looking for his 5th second place of the season, but he's got to hold against Emil.
Yeah, he's got one tough customer to try and defend that second spot from, as Emil Lundell is going to get one more chance to go through. But this time, Byrne won't have the help of DRS into the best overtaking spot on the circuit. All Lundell needs to do is stay under the rear wing of that car in front of him all through this final sector, and it should be relatively easy picking. But one wrong move, and it's going to swing back in Byrne's favor.
Well, they all know that they sit at the tune of Jacob Reed, who will come to the line and look to take the white flag lap, which indicates there is one more lap of racing remaining. Emil Lundell knows this is the greatest chance to make his move, and he is going to be at full bore trying to get this done. James does nothing in a straight line. Here comes Emil Lundell straight to the outside and makes his move with consummate ease up into second position. But does he overcook it through the middle of the corner and give James Byrne something to think about? No is the answer. There's not much more you can do about that. James Byrne now needs an opportunity late on to make sure he can hold that place. Mario Bodlos has fallen too far back off the back of Alex Hagland, but now up they go into the Advan corner for the final time, and Emil Lundell is just stretching his legs to 0.7 of a second. It looks a bridge too far at this moment for James Byrne into the Dunlop hairpin, and it's just going to be a case of formalities, you feel, at this point, unless there is a mistake up over at GR Supra, the last tough place, and there's a half chance for James Byrne. He'll be right underneath with the DRS. He'll land! Oh
Yes.
My goodness, what a send from James Byrne. What an almighty send with a couple corners to go. But for Jacob Reed, back against the wall moment, and that is the mark of a champion. Career win number 24. The title is alive.
Well, it's not quite over between these two as they thunder their way to the start-finish line, as it will just be in Byrne's favor, as the DRS wasn't enough to pull Lundell back in. But that is the move that I've been waiting for all race long, for someone to take advantage of the shorter line down the inside in the final sector. Byrne does it on the last lap of the race and snatches that second place back. What a move.
Mario Bodlos has had an issue on the last lap, and 2 SimSpeed Championship points are going the way of Eduardo Radiz. That is a drop of 21 seconds on the last lap of the race, and I don't know whether it was because he ran himself out of fuel or he gave it back to him. Incredible stuff as he slows down, and Eduardo Radiz given an absolute freebie.
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the in-game text chat to see if anything pops up about why that happened, but it's certainly a confusing incident to say the least. But it just seems to be driving slowly. I don't know if that's any sort of fuel issue, as he seems to have the position back.
I'm flabbergasted by it. I am absolutely flabbergasted by it. You talk about moments that will change championships there. 21 seconds he lost on that last lap. He did a 1:42 on that last lap through, and it didn't look like there was anything at all between him and Eduardo Radiz. So Mario Bodlos will give 2 championship points to Eduardo Radiz, and how much will that count at the end of the season? Jacob Reed gets the victory critically, though, for the 5th time this year, his 24th in career, by 7.2 seconds over James Byrne. And more critically than that, with the 6 points scored by Eduardo Radiz, he takes 19 championship points out the back pocket. James Byrne finishes second, getting that move done on the last lap ahead of Emil Lundell, with George Van Rensburg a respectable 4th place ahead of Volta Lux and Alex Hagland. Eduardo Radiz, a gift of 7th place over Mario Bodlos in 8th, with Jeffrey Lawler finishing up with more championship points for him in 9th, and Dennis Branch taking the final points in 10th place. Just on the outside looking in is Paul O'Regan, Mr. Top 10. couldn't quite manage it today. It's the 9th time he has finished 11th place in his iRacing Grand Prix Tour career, with Florian Kammeier in 12th, dealing with damage in the opening lap of the race. Sebastian Rekov would be the last finisher on the leading lap, with Mark van Dalen 1 lap down. Gerard Borel would also be a lap down, leaving Jason Green 4 laps down, and a finisher in this race, and your 2 retirees, Lyle Pinar and Reynaldo Augusto. So that brings all things into play as far as Fuji goes. That championship gap will take a bit of a nibble, and Jacob Reed needs 6 more races like that to take the title.
Yeah, but I certainly don't think it's enough for Reed to start being worried at this stage. But Reed just needs to keep an eye behind him a little bit, as we've seen how up and down his season has been all season long. Saying season a bit too much there. And Florian Kammeier still has chances to get that gap closed down and snatch that P2. Of course, he didn't have the race to do that today, but we've still got a few races left, and that is plenty of time to take that back off Jacob Reed. James Byrne solidifying his spot up inside the top 5, and is actually starting to threaten Walter Lux and Florian Kammeier for a top 3 position. George van Rensburg comfy up in P7, as he's been consistently outscoring Alex Hagland all season long. No Edward Apariari this week, but he hasn't been able to be jumped by Paul O'Regan, who failed to score this week, but still himself keeps him inside the top 10. Emma Lundell is the first driver outside the top 10 in the championship that was in this race today, as he just keeps himself in front of all of those names behind him, as Jeffrey Lawler on 14 and Mark van Dalen on 13, rounding out that top 20. Dennis Branch and Mario Bodlosh both scoring points today, with Ronaldo Augusto, I think, retiring earlier on from this one. And Gerard Borel just really didn't have the pace to hang on today, unfortunately. But there's the rest of the field as we cycle through the many drivers that have started a race for the SimSpeed Championship broadcast races. It is a lot at this stage, Sperry.
Yeah, we are up at 75 different drivers who have taken a run this season. It is still down on what we've had in previous seasons. We've had at least 90 in every season so far, but it is a known quantity when we get back to racing 2 weeks from today. The Circuit of the Americas is the next port of call. It's a mishmash of many different circuits, and is one of those you like it or you hate it style circuits out there. I think it's one that offers quite a lot of racing prowess for it, but this is the sort of place where if you're good, you're really good at COTA.
Yeah, it's a track that I've always called a little bit derivative, as it takes so much inspiration from a lot of other famous F1 circuits, but brings them together in a very, very unique way. That is certainly a track that can be a pleasure to drive and race on. It's got overtaking opportunities up into Big Red at turn 1, and of course at the end of that huge back straight, which is of course a DRS zone. Tricky middle sector, or tricky final sector even, that makes a bit of a setup compromise. We might see the same sort of thing that we've seen this week at Fuji, where drivers are trying to decide between a medium and high downforce package. So we'll see how those two race together yet again.
You can only catch it with us here on SimSpeed TV. If you haven't done so already, you can like, share, subscribe, follow, do all of those amazing things wherever you're watching this incredible sim racing content here from us, from the entire team here today. Daniel Yeaman, Taylor Mills. My name is Jake Sperry. This is what the Grand Prix Tour is all about. Moments define seasons, and you have them time and time again. What happens if there is no front wing that gets broken by Eduardo Rodis? What happens if there is no spin by James Byrne with 6 laps to go? What happens if Mario Bodlosh doesn't randomly slow down by 22 seconds on the final lap to give a couple points back? What if there's no flu race that takes Jacob Reed out of it at Aragon? That is what makes this championship so brilliant. It's not about the what ifs, it's about the what can you do's. This championship is alive still. Jacob Reed's victory proves all that, and he'll have to do it all over again in 14 days, because we are heading stateside, where races, and let's say it as well, championships are bigger in Texas.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.